Okay, so this is July 30th, Wednesday night, almost 10 o'clock. I just had these ideas and I wanted to put them down while I had them fresh in my mind. And so there's a saying within the psychological community, fixing the facts to fit your feelings, or changing the facts to fit your feelings. One of those two. Same thing, right? Where you adjust the facts because of the way that you feel. If you want to hate somebody, right, you'll find a way. There's people who are like the best people. They're successful and yet humble. They do charity work, all those types of things. I don't believe that is, it's not my definition of success, but it's still a good thing, right? They check all the boxes. And yet there are lots of people that hate those people, right? You understand this, like somebody who's just really good person, really happy, good person, and does great things for everybody. But there'll be people who are jealous and hate that person, or just, whatever it is, whatever reason it is. There's no justification to hate that person, but people root for people like that to fail. They root for people who they haven't done anything to you and really maybe to anybody. And people want them to go to the dark side, right? They want to drag people down to a level of cynicism and hatred and envy and, all these negative things, right? And if you ask the person why they hate that person, they will figure out a way to make it make sense, right? Because that's how people are. That we have our feelings, which are really our emotions, and also our beliefs. And we'll do anything to change reality around us to fit those beliefs, right? Fit those feelings, fit those emotions. And you see it all the time. And the evidence is easier to find than the lies themselves, because you have to get inside a person's head, right? You have to, they won't maybe admit to what they're thinking and maybe don't even understand it themselves. They're distorted reality. But the evidence of distorted reality is that people are so fucked up. Because if you weren't distorting reality, you would be living an efficient life. You wouldn't have any habits like gambling, smoking, womanizing, cheating, drugs, lying, hatred, failure, self-sabotage, low self-esteem, victim consciousness, abuse. None of those things would exist. If people were honest with themselves, they wouldn't do those things. If there was no way to rationalize things, then it wouldn't exist. If there's no victim consciousness, there wouldn't exist. And victim consciousness is deceptive. Because I've said this before, if there's a God, there's a plan. If there's no God, there's no plan, right? There's chaos. When people think of something like the metaverse, right? So the idea of the metaverse is that every time you enter a choice point, right? So let's say you have to make a choice. And some version of you makes an infinite amount of wrong choices. And that sets apart a new timeline that's created, where that version of you lives in a different timeline with other people. And that timeline is altered to the one that you were in before, because there was a choice point and there were 50,000, 500,000 different choices a person can make, infinite amount of choices, and there's all these various timelines. And so that seems really sloppy. Like, why would there be all these alternative realities? It's stupid. Doesn't make sense. So the only way that would not be the case is if we didn't have freedom of choice, that we have the illusion of freedom of choice. The choices that we make are based in the way that we feel, but our choices are always going to be the same, so there's only one timeline. That no matter what, this choice is going to be made by each person, no matter how wrong it is or how ungodly it is or how godly or whatever it is, right? It's still the choice that's going to be made. It's a part of one timeline, and there's only one choice available. People think they're choosing, but they're really not. And so, in all that, it's the way that we feel about the choice, because it's our emotions, our feelings, our internal interpretation that can be adjusted. We can adjust the way that we go about our relationship with God, our relationship with our life, our relationship with the world. That's why I always talk about gratitude being the highest choice. If you are choosing to be grateful in all these circumstances, then you are bowing down and accepting God's will no matter what it is. And so that's why saints get horrific things happen to them in difficult circumstances, because if they can remain grateful, then they're free of all this bondage, because there's nothing that God can do to them, or there's no part of the script that they won't accept as being God's will and be grateful for it, right? And so that's why gratitude is the ultimate condition. But the other side of that is victim consciousness, where you feel like a victim and God's fucking boning you and, screwing you over, and fuck you, God, and I don't deserve this, and, why are you doing this to me? And that could be atheism or being an agnostic, or any of these other things. Gnosticism, as it's called. But either way. So in the assault cycle, and I've shown this in the past, and I'm not going to show it here, but the person, the abuser, the victim, they go into a victim stance, which allows them to distort reality, feeling that they've been wronged. So therefore they get to give themselves permission to do something wrong. And because they've been screwed over, something's unfair, they can extract some sort of satisfaction, and that involves the pain and suffering of other people, whether it be stealing from them or abusing them or any number of things, right? And so this is where, all the distortions of reality come in, where people rationalize their wrong behavior because they've been victimized and somehow life is treating them unfairly and things are unjust, and, all these types of things. And it comes down to their ultimate feeling about God and their ultimate feeling about themselves, right? So the distortion of reality is when you talk about something. If you see an event and you talk to 10 other people and each person has a different interpretation of the event. You watch a movie and each person thinks that the hero was justified, or the hero was actually the villain and the villain was justified, or whatever number of explanations they have. It's because they all have a distorted personal view, personal lens of what's going on. And because each person is invested in their own beliefs and their own victim consciousness and their own emotions, they are distorting reality to fit those things. And that's why you have people who, with all the evidence supporting that Joe Biden was senile and he was a big bag of shit, they built him up like he was some sort of great man and wonderful president, even though he was shitting himself and he was bumping into things because he lost his cognitive abilities. The same way that the Trumpers have distorted reality and to make Trump to be some sort of fucking messiah, when the guy is a narcissistic scumbag, abusive dumbass who is not capable of playing 5D chess and is so obviously a fucking buffoon. And you see this time and time again throughout our civilization. People are distorting the reality around them and willfully lying to themselves and other people. And when God presents them, when the divine plan presents them with facts to show that their beliefs and their feelings and their emotions are wrong, they lock down and they go deeper. They go deeper into their denial and deeper into their anger and deeper into their fuck you, God. I want to believe whatever I want to believe. And so that's why there's not really very many truth seekers. Because to be a truth seeker, you have to be looking to correct the distortion in your worldview. The things, your self-talk and your rationalization and your excuses for doing the wrong thing. And, very few people are willing to do that, even partially, even just a little bit. A little bit of self-improvement, a little bit of, I'm full of shit, let me do something to adjust my, my lens, my distorted lens. And when you get evidence given to you graciously by your experience through the divine system that's trying to get you to confront and erase all your bullshit and bring you back to your pristine original condition, at the purest self, the purest version of your soul, the innocence of your soul, where there's no distortion and there's none of these negative feelings and emotions and beliefs and things that are making you into an abomination. And so, everybody thinks their view of the world is right, and their group of people is somehow better than everybody else, and they all view the world the same way, and they pat each other on the back, and they applaud each other's bullshit, and even when they get confronted. Remember when the QBs were so fucking rattled after Trump turned on them, and he lost the election, and they thought, because of the Q drops, something else was going to happen. They didn't know what the fuck to do, but they regrouped. They didn't fucking just, change. I mean, some of them did, but many of them just adopted another bullshit fucking a bullshit belief system. You know how many people out there who were once very, passionate truthers who now have gone back and they are like truther hunters, and they go out and they argue with truthers, and they, or people who left the Christian religion to go do some other thing that turned out to be a bag of shit, so they ran back to Christianity, even though Christianity also sucks, right? Because the bottom line is, the truth about each person is painful. Like, if you could watch a movie where there was a movie based on your life and they really nailed your fucking issues, and you were watching it, like maybe even like a long TV show, and you would more than likely hate the main character who is a representation of you. And you'd be pissed at the fucking person for being so clueless and not, making all these bad decisions and just fucking their beliefs and all that shit. And then you go like, holy shit, that's me. But there's no recognition. There's no, there'd be defense mechanisms preventing you from seeing yourself, even though the story's based in your life, because people don't want to see their own bullshit, right? They don't want to look through, they don't want to look in a true mirror and see the things that they have to change. And so they distract themselves. And this is why, even the truth community, it's like people are full of shit, right? Because really none of this stuff matters, because, most of this stuff doesn't really affect us in any real way. And when it does affect us, like, their changes aren't so drastic. Maybe things even get better. When it's political, national politics and national economics and things. But, the stuff that has to do with us that could change our existence and change us for the better, people don't want to work on that shit, right? Like, it's just too hard. People don't want to look at the stuff and, look at the divinity within them and embrace their higher nature, right? It's just, a sad state of affairs. And I've been seeing this for a while. I've had experiences, meditative experiences and spiritual things and, whatever it might be. And I've had my own personal change and growth. I don't think I'm, necessarily an expert at it or devoted as well. Like, for the amount of grace that I've been given, I work on myself and I work on it. What I'm talking about here, but it could be a lot better. Like, I think I'm like lowballing it for the amount of, the gifts I've gotten through the Sajmark spiritual practice and my meditative experiences and things, and just, the insights that I've had. But, I really, as I've grown in terms of my being a truther, because I really just don't care. I don't have a belief system anymore. Like, I don't have I never really had it, so it's a little bit easier for me. But, I just don't, I have some preferences, and, I like to make videos a certain way, and, sometimes I'll shit on some group of people or one person more than somebody else, and maybe undeservedly so, but really I don't really care about it, right? Because, it's just a big fucking mess. And we're all a part of it. Like, we're all, we can't separate ourselves from the mess. The mess is our creation, our collective creation. And it's the distortion of reality that has created it. Because, you can see it. Like, everything's fucked up because people are rearranging reality to stick to things that they wouldn't. Like, they wouldn't if they didn't lie to themselves. If you wouldn't lie to yourself, you'd be like, oh yeah, I do that. I should, Even if you didn't change it, just admitting it. Because then you wouldn't be projecting it on somebody else. Because almost everything that you hate is something you hate within yourself. It's some part of yourself that you see in other people that you hate, right? Hate is always self-directed. And so much of what we see here is about hatred. Hatred of the Democrats, hatred of the Republicans. When I look at these two groups, there's really no real difference. Joe Biden and Trump were almost identical. They're both old, groping, sexist, racist, myopic, narcissistic, cheating, grifting. One's a politician, one's a businessman, but both are failures, failing upwards somehow. Stupid, loudmouth. They have just all the same characteristics. Case in point was then when they were arguing in the debate about who had a better golf stroke as the world fucking burned, right? And so, this is what I'm talking about. And so the fact that people are looking at these two guys thinking that there's some kind of a difference and that one of them is going to make a difference or any number of things like that, right? That one party will or one belief system. And it's just a bunch of fucking shitty people who are self-centered and power-driven and, manipulative and they love fucking lying and fucking doing bad shit, right? And so, they enjoy the making the suffering and making everything hard, and they enjoy the drama. Like, there'd be no fucking drama, right? And people would just see the truth, because if you see the truth within yourself, you can see it within everybody else. Like, if you can recognize your own bullshit, then you see the bullshit in other people. And so, that's why I've been very successful as a YouTuber and, this other thing. Because the more that you see your own bullshit, the more you can see this stuff in other people. So it's easy to say, hey, yeah, this is what I see. And you'll be right because, you understand. Like, you understand. Anyways, thought I would give this talk. I guess I'll put this in the beginning of my next video that'll be out. I don't know. We'll see. And also, this will be in the Journey series, and maybe a standalone on the Gratefullness meditation channel. Okay, that's it for now. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I might have already I have a voiceover that I need to put somewhere. I did last night. Probably you just heard it. I'm in the middle of a video that I'm waiting to go to the dentist. Today is Thursday, July 31st. And so I'm waiting to go to the dentist. My condition has improved somewhat, because I wasn't really having much symptoms other than a little bit of swelling in the tooth, whatever. So I got to go to this new dentist, and then I'll have more information, and then whatever. So anyways, I have a video that I'm waiting to put a voiceover about my dentist situation. And then that video will go up tomorrow on Friday. This video will go up on Saturday. So the first thing I saw this morning, the two things I saw was something from Don Lemons. It's a hit piece from The Daily Show, which is, I'm going to talk about how weak that is, right? A hit piece on Joe Rogan.
Millennia, through life's most profound questions. And today, a new thinker has emerged to grapple with the mysteries of our universe.
Even tables. Why do black people like menthol so much?
So, Comedy Central, which is made there, The Daily Show, which is made its living off of clipping CNN and MSNBC and all these various news outlets and all these mocking people's content, really, basically, is the worst on copyright. Like, you can't show any of their stuff. Like, I could destroy this whole thing, but I can do it anyway. Like, it's just, really bad. So they take all these, goofy things that Joe Rogan said, and it's edited in a, not a clean, above board way. I'll show you a few more of these clips, and then I'll explain.
A wolf wore a fedora.
So Joe Rogan apparently did this artwork when he was like a teenager. And it's pretty good. Like, he's good at, whatever. He had the ability to draw. And they're making fun of him because he put a fedora on a wolf. And, like, this is some kind of, mockable thing for a teenage boy to draw something like this, right? This is what, like, I don't know how old he was when he drew this, but, he was high school or before. And so they're, like, fucking reaching into his past. They get into his martial arts a bit.
My brain would just be throbbing, just boom, boom, boom.
And even worse, that's when Rogan realized that he was damaging his brain.
So they go in hard on his martial arts stuff and mock him for a bunch of things. And, again, clipping things that look stupid when he says it. They are stupid. But, like, they all say stupid shit, like all these podcasters, right? And you could always take things out of context, so they're not balancing it with anything he might say that's, has value or where he's been right or whatever. And so they get into him having brain damage, that he was a martial artist who realized that he was taking shots to the head and it was affecting his brain. CTE is a big thing in, the world of sports, contact sports and MMA and all that. And so, like, they're basically implying he has brain damage, right?
Comedia.
Does anybody know how any of this shit works?
Now, Joe Rogan is an okay comedian. Like, he doesn't make me laugh, but, he has some truth or stuff in there. He just had a Netflix special. But this is Comedy Central, right? We're going to get into the hypocrisy in a bit. This is The Daily Show in Comedy Central, and they're, making fun of this comedian who is now, like, got basically maybe the number one news show in America.
Talk he did. Because the most
So they got him here with Alex Jones, you know, because of they had to. So from there, they get into the podcast. They show all these different podcasts. Theo Vaughn, there's various people, and that this thing, and this is original podcast here, and let's see if I have a.
It really is different, than television.
This is way better.
And he says, we got to figure out a way we can make money on this. And they show him advertising for fleshlights, these, like sex toy things. And, the main thing, though, is really they go for the supplements and the alternative medicine.
Hormone replacement therapy,
Vitamin
raw
D,
milk,
vitamin
chocolate
K2.
proteins, fish oil.
So they go after him doing alternative medicine and supplements and things like this that are, that's, a big pharma hit piece kind of thing.
said.
The idea that Jewish people are not into money is ridiculous.
Okay, that sounds bad.
Then they show a picture of a compilation of him saying the N-word. So, they're calling him racist. They're calling him brain damaged. They call him like no talent, these things, right? They're taking on every part. I mean, going in hard, right? For a comedy show. We'll get into that in a bit.
That Tower 7, why does that collapse like that?
Intelligence agencies were involved. Raw milk. It's normal and healthy.
So they list all these conspiracy theories, a lot of them. I just showed you a few. 9/11, Building 7, and then, he goes into raw milk. And they probably all believe in breastfeeding. Liberals, believe in that, right? And, and whether you believe it or not, it's what mammals do, right? So that's raw milk. So, I mean, I've drank raw milk for years, milk cows. We buy raw milk from Amish people. The difference is that it can become, it can go bad. But even when it's, one of the things we used to do when we had dairy cows, I milked cows for years. I milked cows for 6 years, right? And, there was a guy who had a farm near us. He had a diner, and he had lots of chickens. He had like 100 chickens, and he would get all these eggs, and he would use them at his diner. The fresh eggs, he had free-range chickens. And he, I don't know, we were getting something like he was giving away a rabbit hutch because, he had some problems with the rabbits and he couldn't take care of them anymore. He's an older guy. And he asked us if we had any buttermilk. And we brought him some buttermilk. He said, well, that's not buttermilk. And he gave us a butter churn. And all these people in that area grew up on buttermilk. And buttermilk to them, like the buttermilk you get in the store isn't this, is that you would put your cream in a churn, and you just leave it there, and it would split. It would go what people think is bad, but it would become cultured. It would have probiotics in it, and then you'd make this cultured butter, which is real expensive, and then raw butter that's been cultured that has it splits on its own. Milk will go into curds and whey, and then what was left over was cultured buttermilk. And these kids, these old people, when they were kids, grew up on it, drinking it. And they all wanted it. We got requests for it all the time because nobody milks cows anymore. And they loved it. It isn't a great taste, but they got used to it, and it was filled with probiotics, right? It's so, raw milk is not, on the same level of these other things, which we all believe in anyway. And so for Comedy Central to do this, let me get to this last piece here. Okay, so I'm not sure how the Daily Show works. I think they have 4 different hosts that are hosting on different days. Jon Stewart does it 1 day a week, and he has a podcast. First, he had an Apple podcast. He made a deal with Apple, and then that sort of revived his career. He went back to the Daily Show, and then he has...
Could elect a vindictive prick.
I don't know.
Really?
I already mentioned Rahm Emanuel. That's
good podcast, John. The Weekly Show, which seems to be a subsidiary of The Daily Show. And then this guy The unfunny Jordan Kepler. He's just a mess, this guy.
Director Gina Haspel flies to Frankfurt, Germany on a secret mission to secure computer.
So this guy is always hammering conspiracy theorists, like he does hit pieces on so-called truthers and conspiracy theorists. This Desi Lydick is, she also hosts the show. Sometimes they recommend clips of her, not funny. And then this guy, Ronnie, okay, cool with Ronnie Chang. So they all have podcasts. Every comedian who's involved with The Daily Show, every comedian everywhere has a podcast, right? Where they talk about, life and news and whatever their positions and things on. It's a way for comedians to make money, even more so than their comedy, their stand-up comedy. So Joe Rogan, to me, isn't great actor or a great comedian, but he is good at podcasting. He does good interviews, and his podcasts are somewhat interesting. Like when my wife and I travel, we'll sometimes listen to something he has if it's of interest, and he has quality guests, and some of the guests have interesting things to say. And there's a lot of people who are successful doing stupid shit, and Joe Rogan isn't a truther. It's not. He is whatever he is in terms of his contribution to the system. But to all these fucking comedians that now have podcasts, he broke the mold. He created this avenue for a lot of them. He wasn't maybe the first comedian. He was doing it with Tom Green there, right? That's where he learned to do the podcast in the first place. But they go through all the podcasts with Theo Vaughn and Chris Cuomo and all these other people. They're making fun of the manosphere, and yet they're all on podcasts. They're all doing it. So what are they talking about? Daily Show was the idea that comedians would present news, and they were ripping off the Saturday Night Live, the SNL news, right? Where comedians would present news in a way that made it watchable, made it interesting. The comedians had more interesting points, and they could say things like the court jester making fun of not only the king, the president and the politicians, but also the media itself, mocking media. And, Joe Rogan's been able to create this thing and for himself, and then these other people have come in and they have these successful podcasts. And it's a better content. It's just better content. And so for Comedy Central, it's supposed to be about comedians and comedians getting into the world of media, because that's what they did. And they're doing this fucking hit piece. And, it's about Israel and Big Pharma are the two things they're kind of attacking. Like him being an anti-Semite and a racist. They're trying to imply that, he's brain damaged. And then the conspiracy theory stuff. And a lot of that has to do with the supplements and alternative health, which liberals have been doing for a while. My wife and I were talking about this. Liberals began alternative health. All the people that I knew who were anti-vax were liberals. Some conservatives, after a while, there was the right-wing truth and the left-wing truth. But liberals were the ones who, support Whole Foods and herbalism and alternative health methods. And they're, mocking him for that, like he's some kind of right-wing, deranged, brain-damaged piece of shit, when he's, just a comedian like they are, and he has a better podcast than they do. Because theirs is, Jordan Kepler's all about fucking anti-conspiracy theory stuff, and they're all, pushing that fucking narrative, because they work for Comedy Central that's owned by fucking some of the worst people, like is it Paramount or fucking whatever it is, right? Viacom, whatever the fucking, is it? I'm not sure which is the parent company. But they're just, that guy, Redstone, this old guy, he's probably dead now. But, they're just, they're part of the establishment. And they had this little thing that was pretending to mock the establishment, but it's just really a part of it, with Big Pharma and these other companies that support these parent companies and networks. And so they ran this stupid fucking hit piece, and they're all doing the exact same thing, right? They're all doing their fucking podcasts. It's silly. So then, with like an act of divine intervention, these were the two things that YouTube recommended to me this morning. First things, I was groggy, just waking up, and these were the two things that I saw.
I saw in Oliver Darcy's newsletter yesterday And it just sort of shook me up. I'm going to read the headline, what it says in Oliver Darcy's news article, and I'm going to send this to Andy. Andy, you can put it up because it's from Deadline. And I just want to show you guys how we have an opportunity here, and not because of we're not taking glee in anybody's downfall. We're just telling you the reality of what's happening in the world. But I got Oliver's newsletter last night. You guys know I have Oliver on. Usually I have him on Friday. What I got from Status yesterday was really surprising to me. So on Status, this is what it said. So it says, it talked about...
So it's going to be about ratings this is hot takes, cable news is in a downfall. That's surprising to you? Like he talks about legacy media all the time, right? This complete fucking doofus, right?
Picking up the Peacock, which was, let's see if I can get it online. That's all right. That's okay. I'll tell you what it says. It's talking about packing up the Peacock, which was MSNBC is moving out of their headquarters. They've been spun off, right? And so this is what it said, which really got my attention because I don't really read the trades and I don't pay. Oh, there it is. So if you go down where it says off the wire, if you have...
There it is. Your guy just put it up. He's got a producer. Like he doesn't understand how this fucking works. There it is. Like he said it like it appeared by magic, right?
That subscription, go scroll down to where it says...
I do not have the subscription.
That's okay. I have it, but I'll just tell you what it says. It says, off the wire, it says, cable news networks saw year-over-year audience declines from 2020.
He doesn't have a subscription because this is something that somebody here in the industry would have, right? That's what he's saying. He doesn't read the trades anymore because like that would have to do with the ratings and things. You probably didn't read them for years because the ratings sucked for him, right? He probably wasn't paying much attention in his last couple of years at CNN when his ratings plummeted.
While declines are expected after an election year, CNN's numbers in particular remain dangerously low. Now, this is...
Debbie B. gifted 5 Don Lemon memberships.
Oliver Darcy reporting that. Remain dangerously low. The cable news network average...
People are giving this motherfucker money, right? These people are giving him money. Like he's covering Epstein like now he's covering it. He wouldn't have covered it on CNN. But anyways.
Only 497,000 total viewers in prime time for the month of July, despite unrelenting waves of major news.
Yeah, see, and this person, like to cancel cable, like Don Lemons would run back to CNN in a heartbeat. He has this whole thing where he says he's, the legacy media is dead. He got booted. They paid him $20 million to go away. They tried to fire him for cause for saying, inappropriate things about women and some other things, but that didn't stick. They had to give him like $24 million of his remaining contract just to go away because he sucks so bad, right? And, he had that interview with Elon Musk that gave him attention, and now he has whatever, I don't know what kind of views he's getting, but he has enough. He has enough of an audience. But if Don Lemon had to start off like the rest of us, he gets preferences because of being somewhat famous. Like he's got a preferred channel. YouTube will recommend stuff for me. In fact, I'll show you something else. Every day I get 1 or 2 things recommended to me about Don Lemon, which is okay because he's easy to mock, but like they don't recommend any truther shit, right? They bury channels like mine and, other people in the truth community. And they don't, even recommend, they don't even send out notifications. But to this guy, they do. But if this guy was just starting off, nobody would watch him. He's unwatchable. Like, I don't understand. Like, he's got the worst possible audience. And he hawks his merch, mercilessly. He doesn't even need to, he's got enough money. He walked away with 22 mil. His husband has some fucking successful job. They got a couple of properties in New York. He just has to make it. But the guy's merching the fuck up, right? And he's got a membership to his fucking channel. The fucking guy, and these people are paying him for that. And he's like trying to, make it like he's a part of this thing. He got fired and he didn't know what else to do. He couldn't, he got blown out at Twitter with Elon Musk. And so he went on and started doing his own show. And he had somewhat of an audience, some fan base, some small audience. I think he gets like 10, 15, 20,000 views per thing out on his other platforms. But the guy's a fucking joke. He's a dope, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff. Let me go with the other thing here. So he does this thing with music. Release the files, he says. The Commanders to back the Redskins? The Commanders should go back to the Redskins. Release the files. Something else he has, I don't know what it is. Chronic something. You know, it's just all this stuff. It's when Trump said he was sick with something. Release the files. Everyone release the files. I'm suing the Wall Street Journal, right? So this is him. Like, all of a sudden caring about Epstein. You know, he was anti-conspiracy theorist. He was anti-everything. He sucked. He was horrible on the show. He was the worst of the worst. Slamming anti-vax. He was the ultimate in a company man. And believing in this shit. Like, not being smart enough to realize that he's doing it for a paycheck and he's shilling for big pharma. He's volunteering it. He's not even aware how fucking bad it is, right? Someone coming from so-called marginalized groups, and that was his big claim to fame, being an African-American gay man. And he was the most selling out, you know, big pharma, you know, commercialized, non-conspiracy theorist, non-truther guy out there. They fired him. You know, he's out there doing this thing, and he sucks at it, right? Like, he sucks at this thing. Release the files! Like, he's got dopes that watch this shit, because there's lots of stupid people out there. I mean, brain dead people. And so, let's go back to his other thing here. This person says CNN is still on TV, right? Like, you know.
Fox News tops July ratings, but all major networks, news networks, see decline versus 2024 election year frenzy. Okay, so let's go down into the body of this. Fox News noted that it topped the broadcast network's primetime averages for the month. In total day, Fox News averaged 1.53 million, down 19%, while MSNBC posted 530,000, down 26%, and CNN averaged 370,000, down 29%. In the 25 to 54 demo. Fox News averaged 184,000. That's down 31%. CNN posted 62,000, down 44%. And MSNBC was at 52,000. They're off by 37.
Whoa, it's so bad, Don. You should fucking...
The top brass's quest for trying to reduce costs and not wanting to create the stars of tomorrow because, you know, someone with the talent of, say, Rachel Maddow is so expensive, they've deliberately tried to...
Or Don Lemon.
Or Don Lemon, of course.
Yeah. Look at this petty little fuck. You know, Rachel Maddow, they're paying lots of money to stay, and she only does one night a week, right? And she could go on and have more, like, love than Don Lemon's getting. Like, he's not comparable to Rachel Maddow because he was competing against her. Rachel Maddow and Don Lemon shared the same time slot, and Don Lemon got bounced to the morning show, and he called it a promotion, and he pissed everybody off there and argued about women and said stupid shit, and they fired him. Where Rachel Maddow's getting paid $20 million for one night a week, right? I mean, we all know how bad she sucks, but Don Lemon's, you know, if you're judging their success head to head, Don Lemon's had to run to doing a podcast, which he didn't know what the fuck he was doing, still doesn't. And she's, you know, she only has to wait one day a week for like $20 or $30 million a year, which is fucking crazy. But, you know, they're going to have to get rid of all that shit because they can't have it. But this guy's saying they don't want to cultivate stars anymore because they demand too much money. You know, so, and they can't pay it because, you know, it's just like with Stephen Colbert. They can't afford it.
They have not invested in the type of personalities that really bring an audience in. And this is one of, or rather, that is one of the, one of the...
I'm resisting making fun of this guy's speech impediment or what fucking...
the things that's now brought us to this place. Another factor, of course, is kowtowing to the administration. Another factor, of course, is story selection and being unwilling to really cover what people are interested in, like Epstein. But yeah, it's a dire outlook.
And what do you think? I agree with you, and no matter how you,
We the people want the truth. He's coming to Don Lemon. This is what I was saying about subjectivity. Everything's just falling into place, right? So I made that voiceover last night you listened to in the beginning. And these two things came up. The Daily Show doing a hit piece on Joe Rogan, which is why? Why would you do that? You're just promoting him. It's not like you're going to convince people who are Joe Rogan fans to, you're just going to, you're minimizing your show and you're being hypocritical. And then Don Lemons is a complete dope who's, somehow, doing okay. I don't think he's making the money he was making at CNN here, but, he's whatever. And he sucks. I mean, he's horrible. And he's always coming for the legacy media now. But if they offered him a job back, he'd run. Right.
you feel about the whole Tapper book, because that caused such huge headlines. The reporting was that a lot of people started tuning out after that book because they did not think it was fair. Now, look, you be the judge of whether it's fair or not, the reporting on it. But that they were kowtowing. And remember the thing that happened with Morning Joe. Now, I think that I'm pretty fair about it. I give people their praise and whatever. Jake is actually a former colleague and a friend. And, you know, I look at all the folks there, whether they think I'm a friend or not. I still love them and I want them to succeed over at CNN and at MSNBC. You guys know I go on Jen's show all the time. I'm going on Ari Melber's show soon.
Yeah, so like you go back to legacy media every time they call you. You run back to him. Now he goes on MSNBC. So Aaron Burnett had him on to do with Elon Musk, even after he got fucking bounced out of CNN and for so many different reasons. And she's on CNN, and then he's going on these other two shows that are on MSNBC, Jen Psaki and Ari Meebla, right? And so, you know, he'd run back to him like these fake, alternative media people. And, you know, I mean, Don Lemon's just clueless. He just knows nothing, right? And so
Simone wants me to come on her show. I'm going to go on Simone's show. So I support them, but they're in a really tough place right now. And it's not necessarily the journalists making. I think Peter is right. I think it is the corporations making, because a lot of the times the corporation wants the news cycle and the focus and the take on the news.
All right, let's move it just to the end here.
And Joy, who were very outspoken about what they saw as war crimes and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. I think of you, Don, and how you were so ahead of the curve in calling out Donald Trump in the first term as a racist.
You were so ahead of the curve. You were so ahead of the curve, John.
It seems to me that even before we saw some of the most fascistic tactics employed by this now second Trump administration, the
Don, remember that part about misinformation, lying, not covering stories? We want to see the kowtowing cover-ups to Trumpism, like a few good men. We want the truth.
Corporate folks,
$10
in legacy media have just been so risk averse and now only want voices they feel they can control. And
they only want voices they feel like now they do. Before they didn't. They didn't control Don. Like they're firing people they can't control. Or people get shitty ratings, right? Like Don Lemon and Joy, whatever her last name is. And so it's bad. Like it's bad. Then
I think audiences perceive that, and that is my guess as to why we're seeing these numbers.
What I want to see with some
you guys have to guess at it. Like you don't know the fucking difference between legacy media and then all this other stuff. You have no idea what the difference is. It's authenticism. It's being authentic, right? Authenticism. They're not authentic. They're not. They just read this stuff as like, the way that they talk. They have this news voice. They come out and read the news, and that used to work. It was like a persona they put on. They all have the same accent. You go across the whole country. You go to the South. You go to fucking New York and Chicago. And none of the news anchors have a local accent. Like, why is that? You're watching local news, and they all have that, accent, that news accent, and they all talk to you like, in a suit and a tie and all this stuff. Oftentimes they're just, uneducated, shitty journalists, or not even journalists, who don't have any ability for critical thinking, and they just are good at reading shit, and then looking good doing it or whatever. But it's, there's that whole movie Broadcast News that covered that. They were moving more and more into just hiring actors, Reagan-esque type actors, who would read the news to you, and they weren't real journalists. And that, and there was just all this corporate propaganda. And so people don't want that shit anymore. And now that there's an alternative, of course people are going to choose something real over something fake. Even if you suck and your real sucks. Like you're being real sucks, like Don Lemons. Don Lemons is better here than he was on CNN. And so, of course that was going to happen. You just didn't have a choice before. Cable news dominated when there was no choice.
Folks, I put some of the stuff up in the chat. And by the way, thank you for your very generous support here. But I do have to say, this is why it's important for you guys to support. These are the subjects that we talk about.
Mr. Lemon, I watched you on CNN for years. I understand there are going to be biases for many different layers of production. I want to thank you for continuing to be a journalist, not Musk, but it's time for a third party. $20 from J.P. Chastain.
That D.L. Hughley and I talk about when we do our talk, our show at City Winery that we want to take around the country.
Like fucking D.L. Hughley and Don Lemons together forever. And so, let's move to this other piece there. So what I do with the connecting to the divine, working for God or whatever it is, the Sajmarg, connecting to the divinity within you and serving that, whatever I do with that. I had these 3 clips here, and I was going to put them in 3 different videos. They've been up for about 4 days. And I never had time because Trump was just imploding with his Jeffrey Epstein stuff. But it fits perfectly into this video. So this is CNN now, right? And again, I had these up 3 days ago.
New this morning, as we said, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin, is demanding the Justice Department release all recordings and transcripts from the...
Okay, let's move forward. I got to find here it is.
President Trump before this most recent election. And listen to what Joe Rogan is now saying when discussing the Epstein issue.
When we thought Trump was going to come in and a lot of things are going to be resolved, we're going to drain the swamp, we're going to figure everything out. And when you have this one hardcore line in the sand that everybody had been talking about forever, and then they're trying to gaslight you on that.
When you have Joe Rogan talking about the Epstein case.
Okay, so that's, look at these face here. So remember when Joe Rogan was demonized for taking ivermectin? Because these fucking big pharma shills, Don Lemons, I'll play the clip of Don Lemons after this one here, doing the same thing with Chris Cuomo's. Let me play that clip here.
I think we have to stop coddling people when it comes to this and the vaccine, saying, oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are. The people who aided and abetted Trump are stupid because they believed his big lie. The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind. Because they are keeping the majority of Americans behind.
But they are all hammering Joe Rogan. And he went after CNN, and there was a whole thing. Like I think he mentioned Don Lemon personally. It's Joe Rogan. They had a whole thing. But now, all of a sudden, he's a truth teller because he's talking about Trump and Epstein.
As a line in the sand and gaslighting, what does that tell you about where this story is and where it's going?
Yeah, look, there's a reason, as Karen pointed out.
Karen. All right, so that's number 1 here. So, this is from Morning Joe. Look, she's got some kind of Native American.
Ghislaine Maxwell, if he wants to. Meanwhile, the Trump administration seems to believe the president's base will move on from the Epstein files. It has not. But podcaster Joe Rogan disagrees, calling out the administration for gaslighting its supporters. Here's what some of Rogan said on Friday.
look, we still have ADHD, right, collectively as a nation, right? I mean, things move on. And I think maybe that's what they're, some people are saying, look, they've called the recess on Capitol Hill because they figure by the time they come back in September, everybody will have moved on from this, right?
Yeah.
I think they're wrong. I don't think this feels like and just looks like that one of those handful of conspiracies, again, you go to JFK or whomever, that's just going to hang around.
This
right?
is a line in the sand.
Yeah.
This one's
Yeah.
a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Because this is one where there's a lot of stuff.
It's really clipping it here.
About, when we thought Trump was going to come in and a lot of things are going to be resolved.
Yeah.
We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to figure everything out. And
we saw this clip before, right?
The case that the president is trying to make is just not working. Saying it's a hoax perpetrated by the Democrats. We remind people that Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges in the summer of 2019.
All right, so here's what this guy's going to say something.
And Jonathan Lemire, again, the bigger problem for the president seems to me is that his base.
His base. It's a fucking base, right? So, there's no accountability for Joe Rogan interviewing this piece of shit. And the interview was okay to listen to. I have no problem with the interview. And I have no problem, I'm talking about Joe Rogan interviewing Trump. It's when Joe Rogan pointed out that his ear was fucking, there was no scar on it. And fucking Trump defended it in a way. And it was like, Jesus Christ, the guy didn't get shot, right? Like Joe Rogan's like, there's nothing there, right?
Right over here.
Oh, it's a tiny little
See,
mark.
it zicked right there.
Yeah. But it healed up pretty fucking good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's little.
No, you didn't
it's
get
a little bit.
cauliflower.
No. The point of the bullet was a
Boy.
little of the ass, but you see the thing's taken off a little bit.
So the rest of this video is going to be called something like "You Can't Handle the Truth" or "Fucking Nobody Wants to Hear the Truth" or something like that. That's for Journey series listeners. So because I'm going to put this audio in that as well. But all this stuff happened today, where I made that voiceover last night, and I want to make it before I forgot. And I didn't know whether I was going to put it in the video that's going to go up tomorrow, which is Friday, or the video that you're watching that'll be up on Saturday, I believe. And so I didn't know. I was just making the audio. The other video's kind of long already, and I want to add an update on my, from the dentist thing. So the whole dentist thing and the stuff with Trump imploding just set everything back because there was bombshell shit that was coming out of Trump's mouth every day. And there's some more stuff. Don Lemons is going to go live with release the files. And there's other stuff going on like that, right? Stuff to do with, I want to talk about how the Virginia Giuffre thing looks a little bit, her whole storyline, making this more staged. But, the bottom line with all these things is people lying to themselves. Like Babaji, the second master of the Sajmark system, said, the worst kind of lying is lying to yourself. You start believing your own lies. And Trump clearly believes his own lies, as do most people. And you start believing your own bullshit and your own propaganda. And then you just create a universe based in your lies being reality, right? And I should cover that next time I cover Trump, in terms of, he thinks his lies are reality. And then when he speaks his reality, he thinks that people will see it his way, which everybody to some extent does or thinks, right? And so, people aren't looking for the truth because the truth is painful. Maybe that'll be the title of the video. People aren't really seeking the truth because the truth is painful. And so that'll be the title of the video. If you got to go back and watch the whole thing if you've done the Journey series. But this will also be up on, I'll definitely put this one up on the podcast. But this stuff with, Joe Rogan and, this hit piece, that just came this morning. And then Don Lemons, those videos were back-to-back recommended by YouTube, and then I had those two clips. And there's more of them. I think I only opened a few of them. There's all these clips of mainstream media promoting Joe Rogan's position and some of these other podcasters. I showed you another clip from that a couple days ago. 4 videos ago. And so the mainstream news is looking at podcasts and doing podcasts and trying to change their format and trying to use, Joe Rogan in the title to get more views, and whatever it is, to tap into his audience or some other whatever they're doing. I think Comedy Central may be trying to do the same thing. Obviously, that's part of it. At the base of this, there's these falsities, these thinking errors and victim consciousness, and ideas that when you start off with the idea that the system has to keep on going, like it's not an option for the system to collapse. Like that's it's a premise that, if you look at the history of human civilization, empires collapse. There are runes. I've shown you the runes. You go Google the runes of ancient empires and cities that have collapsed and cultures that have collapsed and no longer exist. These countries, the world, the names of the countries have changed over and over again, especially in, there was no division of countries in the Native American areas, but there was Native Americans that occupied different parts of the Americas, and their tribes intermingled in these areas, but they had specific areas that were dominated by local tribes, and all that shit's changed. We know that's gone almost completely. Just these reservations, these bad lands and shrinking lands that were given to these peoples. The good land that they were living on was taken from them. There's 100 million of them. There's like 120 million Native American people here when the white people got here. So that all changed, right? And then it became the United States and these different states and these things, just arbitrarily drawn by rivers and, borders and things, the maps of the states and the counties and all these things. And they had local names. And sometimes the Native American local names are there in the cities. There are cities that are named after the Native American, and certainly some of the regional areas. You find these names on maps, right? You're like, oh, those are Native American names, right? India is a country that used to include Pakistan, for example, and it was called Bharat. India I think in Sanskrit. You had all these, Rome and these, Alexander the Great. These people that all of a sudden they expanded and they went into these different areas. And so, the names of these places change and everything is, subject to change. And so the idea that the system wouldn't collapse or couldn't collapse, our global system, and there's, America will be here forever, is a silly idea. It's just simply not the case. It's just a matter of when. It's not an if. And so that's always there as a possibility. Like if you just exclude that inevitability, it's like saying that you're never going to die, which is what people kind of think, right? That, you're never going to die. And as you get older, you realize, oh, yeah, I'm dying. Like I can see it. I understand what's happening with my body. And, I see the right, I know it's, if I live till 90, that'll be, my people in my family, my brothers and sisters, they're getting into their 80s and late 70s, 80s. And, my parents lived into their 90s, but that's about it. I'm not going to live over 100, And if I do, I'll be one of those fucking Gollum-like fucking, who wants that shit, right? So, your death is inevitable. And, all these things, like it's just part of it. And so, and it's not such a fucking big deal. Like, people make it a big deal. It would be a big deal for us to change as you get older and you're habituated to your lifestyle. But it's no big deal. At least, what America collapses, it's not some fucking tragedy. The world, the economy, the dollar, all these things, they collapsed. It's not some tragedy. It's a blip in time. It's a small thing that, it's a small place that, in 10,000 years after America collapses, there'll be no evidence that it ever existed. There'll be nothing, on planet Earth to let you know that there was an America. Things not only disintegrate, even computer chips and shit like that, but, almost everything disintegrates after 10,000, maybe some fucking radioactive half-life, like some bullshit stuff like that lasts for 1 billion years from depleted uranium. But for the most part, there'll be there'll be nothing left. And so it's not some fucking big deal. Like it's a big deal to us personally, each one of us, and then collectively. But other than that, it doesn't mean anything to the grand scheme of things. It's like we go in there and we just destroy a whole fucking ant colony. You have this, huge ant colony of thousands of ants. And it's doing well, and some person comes in with some fucking pesticide or whatever, ant killer, or whatever it is, and just or builds a building there and just rips it out. So, they all die, or they go somewhere else, and whatever it is. Like, some survive, and it doesn't matter. Like, it just happens. They're probably pissed. Like, oh, I got to build another one of these motherfuckers, right? And so but it's like life. Animals are relocated all the time, and they're always getting pushed out, and eventually, they have a short lifespan, and they have their time here, whatever. But it's not as big a deal as people make it. Certainly, death and destruction. But we've been taught to be scared of death and terrified that our system will collapse. And for maybe good reason, because we're worthless fucking people that can't do shit without our system. We're so dependent on it, like I said before. But none of these things matter. And so, if you have these liabilities, these things that just can't happen in your psyche, you can't lose somebody close to you. You can't, things that are just like, you're not going to recover, knockout blows, devastate you, because when the truth hits you, you're like, this didn't happen. That can't, just, whatever. There's a preceptor. I talked about this guy. He's letting everybody come in late and these things. Nice guy, but, did the Sajmark preceptor. But he really didn't know the system. And his wife's and his father, his wife's father, his father-in-law, and his father both died. He was Indian and, died in India. And his wife and him just didn't fucking recover. Like, they were just, their families are much closer, and, there's a lot more connection with their families, and he just couldn't recover from his dad dying. And they had one son, and their son was like, he was brilliant. I know that because when I went to his son's funeral, they had a neighbor that had a couple of twins. The neighbor seemed like a nice guy. But they lived in a cul-de-sac, and like everyone in the cul-de-sac was Indian, right? And this is in, like a small city, Virginia. And he went to the beach with his son, and the neighbor had like twins, kids who were like, 2 or 3 years old, toddlers. And the preceptor was watching the toddlers as the father of the toddlers went swimming, and his son was swimming with them. And there's these undertows that exist in Virginia and North Carolina. There's some severe undertows. And his son, like a wave hit his son, and his son was like 16, 17 years old. And he never fucking came back up. And I went to the funeral, and the guy came in, and 2 people were supporting him. It was probably 3-4 days after his son died. And the guy just was catatonic. Like, he was just gone. He was like, they probably had to dress him up and get him to the funeral. He had to be carried in. He was, he was like, his leg, he couldn't even move. He was like catatonic, practically. And I didn't know if he was going to psychologically recover. He really didn't do the meditative practice, and he couldn't even deal with his dad dying. And I know the kid was smart because people were signing this, register that they were there. There was a couple of kids there. I think they were all white kids, like suburban, And the kid before me, I signed the registry after one of these kids, and the kid wrote, "To the smartest guy I know." And the kid who died, this guy's son, so this guy was, I guess he was some real smart kid. And, they had one child, and he was gone, and they couldn't ever fix it. They couldn't recover from that, right? Like, they just, it was a knockout blow. I mean, I don't know what happened to this guy. I don't think he's doing the practice. I don't know anything. I think I've asked about him. I definitely asked about him, but, people didn't know what happened to him. And so, there are things like that people have that are just knockout blows that they just can't recover from because, there's no sense of the reality of the nature of life and death and change and things like this. And, that's why people rearrange reality to fit their view of reality. And then they, we're collectively trying to make it so this system just doesn't collapse. Like everyone just like out of desperation and fear and all that shit. And, it's collapsing and then people can't fucking know what to do with it. And no matter what kind of podcaster or CNN person or whatever, if you're not willing to look at what's happening and at least have the idea that the possibility that this thing's collapsing, and, at least be able to verbalize that. Like, this might not fucking be saved. You're never going to be a truther because you're not, you're in denial of the possibility is always there. It's like saying something isn't going to ever die. And so when all the signs, when you look at, when everything points to, if you look at on every level, what's happening, it looks like it's collapsing. So, there's all that. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.